Good evening, Matthew Mack with Mack Engineering. I want to apologize, I was emailing some of the board members, I didn't know if I was gonna actually make it here tonight, so I actually, thank goodness, made it. So I'm here for Yarnell, we've been working closely, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
sorry, I'm sitting.
Thank you. We've been working closely with the township, we've secured the ENS approval from the Conservation District, we've secured planning module approval from DEP. We've worked closely with your engineer to resolve all the comments. The only remaining items are some waivers. Because of the unique configuration of the lot, it's a flag lot. We're trying to put stormwater facilities along the entrance to leave nothing out. Basically, at the end of the day, the two basins we're proposing don't have any discharge out. But because of the narrowness of the lot in the entrance, we're not able to make some of the de minimis setback requirements from the property line. I believe your engineer supports these waivers. Some of the other waivers are curb and sidewalk along Yarnell Road. We only have 50 foot of frontage there, so there's no sidewalk or curb on either side. So it really wouldn't make sense to put curb and sidewalk along the frontage.
Question, you said you have the Conservation District's approval?
Yes.
How did you get that? We don't have the stormwater approval yet, do we?
So the stormwater is independent. This was under an acre, so we have the ENS approval. They did review the stormwater also as part of their ENS review. So we've secured that. Again, we believe that the design is complete minus some of these waivers.
So you got a Conservation District approval because you're under an acre?
Correct.
So you got a waiver?
No, not a waiver. It's called an ENS plan. So over an acre is called an NPDS plan. We didn't have to get an NPDS permit.
All right.
Okay. Other question? So if you take a look at the waiver list, you see where our engineer review goes. So there's actually two ordinances that are involved with this. You'll see the SADO, it's at the top, which is actually not applicable right now, so we can just put those aside. The issue is with the stormwater, which you see at the last part of those items there. And you also saw that our engineer reviewed all those, took a look at it, had his opinion. So Eric, you wanna add a couple things on?
Yeah, I'm sure you know the history of this property and that there's a lot of concern of stormwater in this area. So my recommendation to the board is that we not act on these tonight, but try and get additional information from our engineer as to are there possibilities to not grant waivers from all or some of these sections if it was designed in a different way? Especially given that the focus that's been on this property since it's been coming through the process. So are we under any time constraints with your application at this point, or?
I don't
This is
believe
probably a
your,
couple of months.
I was gonna say, I don't think your stormwater has a time extension.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing we're, in under review for.
Okay.
I will tell you, so this had two legs, let's bring everybody up to date, this had two legs going out to Yarnell Road. The original leg was actually easier to design, but through development with the township, they requested us to put it at the other entrance, which we did willingly. And then hence that required some of these waivers.
So when you say the township asked that, the engineer asked that?
Yeah.
So I think that's some of the information we need to have from our engineer. And these simple one-line recommendations, I don't think are enough to give us the information we need to act on this.
It was also some of the residents around there also asked for that.
So,
The other item was we were looking to limit the number of tree disturbance. So we positioned the house in an area that limits the most tree disturbance out there. The curb and, like, we could just talk them briefly, the curb and sidewalk, I don't think anybody's looking at that.
well, I can tell you, the opinion I gave to the board is that that doesn't even apply to us. You're not a land development, so I
Okay,
don't think
so
that
we
that.
don't even need those.
Yeah, yep.
The other one is the RCP for the outlet structure. It's private pipes. I don't know if they even make 4 or 6 inch diameter RCP pipe. The other one is grading within 10 feet. That's just, it's not like we're filling it a lot, it's just some incidental grading with some silt socks to put down. So it's not a huge concern. The 1 year, 24-hour strain, so the area that's going in there is so small that you can't physically drain it within 24 hours. It just leaves out quicker. But again, we're over controlling what the pre to the post is less than what was there before. It's the bypass area, the little bit of disturbance that's the really only thing leaving.
And were there numbers for those comparisons given to the engineer? So I think that may be helpful to the board too, if the engineer could come to this board and tell them that you're actually improving
Yeah.
the current, which sounds like that's what you're saying.
I believe that's, yeah.
Even
I
by
think
adding
that's
a
fair
house, you're
statement.
improving the current conditions. And I think what we want to see with the engineer as well, to see if there is a way to even improve it more. This is the sole focus of many of the residents in this area, so if we can try and improve it even more than what you're proposing now, that's what we'll be looking for, I think, to exchange for some of these waivers.
To move forward, should I have a conversation with your engineer about this? Cause
Maybe
maybe,
even the three of us could have that
Yeah,
conversation.
that'd be
So,
great.
yeah.
Do you have my contact info?
I believe so.
Okay.
If not, do you have a card?
This
No,
has been a nightmare day.
I know that I have it, so.
And then I didn't realize 100 was closed coming here,
Are you
so.
from Lidditz? Are you from Lidditz?
Lancaster area.
Yeah.
Eric,
I have it.
is there a chance we should move this to the planning commission?
If the planning commission gets up and running quick enough for it, the answer is yes.
Mhm.
I don't wanna hold them up if the planning commission's gonna take a month or two, this may just take till next month, so, okay?
If I may, maybe I was a little confused on this point. The neighbors, since this is on Mock Road and that's where I live, they have contacted me quite a bit on this, and they requested a meeting with Trace and I. We gave them 2.5 hours. They've done a lot of talking to us. I emailed a couple of them. I said, listen, I will represent you tonight as a commissioner. You certainly can make public comment. But there's a couple of comments I just want to get out there, make sure it's very clear. That area, Mock Road, there is a lot of water runoff from this property. And the reason being is a couple different things. I'm sure engineers can probably tell you better than I can, but there's a layer of soil up there, but underneath that layer of soil is a layer of pebbles, and it's like a expressway for water. Now, it absorbs a couple inches of water, then all of a sudden it's like flushing a toilet. It just comes all the way out, and it shoots over the road, it shoots everywhere. The neighbors up there have done extensive, and they spent a lot of money. You can't hold back water, all you can do is control it. I think that's the old adage. They move it around their properties and they do it okay. If high water events, they still get a wet backyard. My property actually technically used to border this property, but then they subdivided it. But that whole area, and I forgot the name of the person who sold the property, but Sitco. Maybe before them, but they put a series of drainage ditches all around there. And if you go down Mock Road on a storm event, you could see 5 different rivers coming off that area. These neighbors have a concern, and I think it's well founded. I don't know how you put a house up there. I looked at the plan, I looked at buying this property at one time, and on the plans, it said, this is not a building lot, or this is not a buildable lot. I don't know how much clearer it can be. My engineer went up there with my realtor, and I said, give me the highest and best use before I buy this, and they said, put a bench there, you can watch the squirrels walk around, because that's about all it's worth. I don't know how we're gonna squeeze a house up there. Moving the plan commission may be an okay idea. I prefer to be part of that, since I promised the neighbors I would follow this. I see Mr. Ganges here, he didn't make comment, and maybe he's letting me make a forum, but the neighbors have put a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of sweat into moving that water around their properties. I don't know how putting a house up there is gonna help them. And we have to represent the taxpayers first. Now, I know the new property owner may be a taxpayer, okay, so we have to represent the majority of the taxpayers, which is probably 7 families or so. So I wanna be very careful with this. I don't wanna take action on it tonight to waive any, waivers, if possible. Man, I need a lot more information and a lot more assurances. And then I gotta convince my neighbors up there that this is okay, and that's gonna be a high reach.
I can answer some of those. They came up there in the zoning hearing. So the original subdivision plan that was done was, they didn't create a buildable lot. But then that's why it said not a buildable lot. It meant that planning wasn't done, septic planning. Septic planning was then done through DEP and got that approval, making it a buildable lot. That's where I had to make that clarification in the zoning hearing. I believe that at the end of the day, we're capturing the water in these basins and directing it away from those families. So I think after we meet, I think we can show that with the engineer and then get some, because honestly, we're reducing the flows in those basins. We're capturing flow that went on to some of those neighbors, putting it into a basin and then slowing it much further down and then releasing it to the roadway for the front part. So I believe the neighbors below us should see less water at the end of the day. With regards to, again, we tried to work through your ordinance. I think we did a pretty good job of limiting the trees and, putting the driveway where we were told to put it, all those items. So I think with a meeting, and we've met with the residents out there. Jackie in my office was out there looking at something, they all came up. So we appreciate their concern, but honestly, we are trying to address their concerns.
Well,
So,
just
and
to
we're
give-
fine, and we're fine if you wanna schedule a meeting with the township engineer and some of the neighbors, we can go through the plan and show how we're meeting the intent. The items, some of the items that we're asking for the relief for, it's like concrete pipe, that's not gonna change
No.
the design. You know, the 1 year, 24-hour house, that's not gonna change the design. But their concern is more about rate, how fast the water's coming out there. We ran perk tests on there, you're right, there's no flow, but we got a design that meets the DEP and your township requirements for those.
Well,
And we're
think
happy,
that-
and we're happy to meet with you guys.
I
to
think
go
their
over that.
concern with the waivers, and I won't speak for them, but I will, is moving these basins closer to the edge of the property.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be a problem. The reason that setback is there in case they don't work.
Well, here's the thing, the basin is lined, so they won't see any water going into their house. But to address the concern about the water coming on them, you have to have a basin there.
I know.
And if you have this long driveway, there's no other way to control it. So you can't have 200 feet of driveway and have the basin up here. You'd be leaving all that water onto the neighbors. So there's only one place to be clear where that basin can go to meet the intent.
Also, I had talked with some of the neighbors too, and I walked the property, and their concern is, even if it hasn't rained for weeks, their yards are still wet. I mean, wet. You're sinking into the ground, so that is something. Also, a house was recently sold there, and they discovered black mold once the couple started ripping off the wallpaper. And that's from the water pooling up against the houses and remaining there. So, the woman who moved out, an elderly woman, she never felt good for years. Now this young couple has to, get all that mold removed. So the pooling of the water in the yards, there's a gentleman there that can't even use his yard.
But to be clear, what we're doing is we're not directing any flow towards any of these neighbors. So just.
I get that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
get that.
I think honestly, at the end of the day, they should see less. Now, the road, it's gonna be directed to the road where ultimately everything ends up anyway, but we're wrenching that back extremely. So the intent with our design is, a rainstorm comes, all these people get flooded, right? We're taking a basin that it has lining in it, it's holding it back. Now the rainstorm has gone, and now our basin is slowly leaving it out.
Just to be clear,
Mm.
and Kathy is right, but somewhat, and when it rains, they direct the water around their house successfully now. Now, they do, some have backyards are flooded. I don't wanna say they get flooded and all of a sudden they're gonna get less flooded and everything's okay. I wanna let you also forewarn you, some of these neighbors know what they're talking about when it comes to engineering. I mean, they were schooling me in quite a bit. So I want them to see and understand the plans if this is gonna go through. And again, I live there. I looked at buying that place, it's a tough sell to me if you're gonna put something on that. It's not a big property. It used to be 25 acres, but now what's it, 5 or 3?
It might be larger than that. In relation to the other property, it's large, but in
Yeah,
the
well,
grand scheme.
it was okay when you had all this big property to put one house, but now you subdivide, and it's like, now the other guys on the other side with that property is having problems too, blaming me, of course. Anyways, thank you, again, transparency to the neighbors is key to this.
And
They
we're-
know this stuff better than I do in some sense.
We're fine if you guys wanna set up a meeting during the day.
When it's
Again,
fine.
I just need to get this through. We've been here a long time.
If you don't hear from me in the next 2 days, reach out to the township engineer and then we'll coordinate a meeting.
That'd be great.
Is that all right? Is that
No, I'd
represent?
like to make some comments, and my neighbors would too.
Can-
We can do it now, or we can wait for
One
the
second,
second.
more commissioners have questions for the engineer?
No.
Okay, So if you'd hold on a second, and residents who want to make comments on this, come up to the mic and introduce yourself, please. Yes, ma'am, come on up.
Hi, I'm Danny Malitsky. I live at 1998. Is that on?
Yeah, I think it's on.
Green light's gotta be on.
A couple of things. The property that you own is 10.8 acres, correct?
It's not my property.
Oh, okay, but.
They're working on it. I believe you're right.
So, my question, what, are you trying to keep everything on 0.8 acres?
Ma'am, if we could, because we'll set up a special meeting that they'll set up for the residents to come. If you have a comment, you just can give comments, they'll take back and work those if you would.
It seems as though you're trying to keep everything in this little tiny area.
So
Yeah.
that was to protect the trees. So there's a tree ordinance to limit the number of tree clearing out there.
Okay.
So we're working within, I don't wanna get too deep into it, we can have a separate meeting, but the intent is that we are trying to limit the disturbance out there.
But you're taking all the trees from behind the properties that would protect the houses that are there, because once the trees are gone, we have a bigger water problem.
We can add additional trees if that's a request.
That takes 20 years.
You have to.
We're getting into a debate.
Okay.
I just need your comment, ma'am, and did you get the comment?
The basin that you speak of is going to put the water slower onto the road.
Correct.
Okay, just so you understand, we have a major road erosion from the water that comes off that property, and everybody has put in their drains, and it all comes out onto the road. Major.
So I'll
And
tell,
the township has been there to repave and repave and repave.
so this should resolve that concern, so.
Ma'am, let's let her make a comment. And then, you have any more comments, ma'am?
And then the other thing I had to say was, it's hydric soil, which doesn't absorb water. Just so you understand.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, please. Remember comments, please.
No problem. Josephine Class, 2086 Yarnell Road. I strongly think that this should go to the planning commission due to the impact that this would have on us. And if it's delayed, well, then we can all come up with a good resolution for this, water problems that we have. And I do think a planning board would be the better way to handle it. This way we can put everything out, look at the maps, see exactly how things are gonna happen, and where their ideas are and where our issues are. And I think that would be the appropriate way to do it. And as far as the water going onto the road, well, we have road erosion, and that's not a good thing either, due to winter and people walking and children catching school buses. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Ma'am? Others? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Lucy Czerkowski. We recently bought 2096 Ronald Road, the property that would border his property as they're building. As it was addressed, obviously, upon tearing into the wallpaper, we have learned that the entire house was covered in black mold. So now we have to go through extensive mold remediation, which included removing the drywall in every single room, which has now led us to very long-term processing. The remediation that we thought we could move in a month is now looking at probably not till April or May due to this mold remediation. I am also 6 months pregnant. I'm due in June, the beginning of June. We have now extended our stay into families since we have lost our ability for housing, since this has gone longer than expected. We have a 2-year-old, as well as a dog. This is obviously very inconvenient. Upon being at the property, we have seen the water has caused extensive issues upon our backyard, again, as the house is being built directly on our property line. So we will receive the most of the water that out of anyone. Upon also trying to go there during the recent weather events upon the weekend, we had saw how much damage was being caused to the road as we were trying to drive there, and the road is completely covered leading up to our house. showing that the water is already not being navigated, so we're just adding more and more and pushing this way. What's it gonna cause? If we're already crossing 4 inches of water to get here, where are we gonna be at that point? Again, the biggest concern is that our house has shown damage of the flooding. Our wash machine is put on stilts, our oil is on stilts, every single cabinet in that basement is on stilts. She had put an extensive French drain system in order to also navigate the water out. She had done waterproofing to the basement, and it's still showing the water being inside of the house. It's obviously an issue to navigate that water already, so to push another house onto that property bordering ours is only gonna cause more problems for us as well. On top of this extensive mold that we're already dealing with. Again, we have to replace the drywall, studs, and the insulation in our entire first floor. And with finding problems within our cabinets and everything of our kitchens. Anything else? Otherwise, I think that is upon us. Obviously, we were a little late to the party, since we just bought the house, didn't have much time to look into anything, or be at the previous meetings. But with us having a newborn baby coming in June, a 2-year-old already, me being pregnant, I already can't step foot in the house. Upon the thousands of dollars this has also caused us now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes. I'm Joe Ganchi, 1998 Yarnell Road. When this matter was brought to the zoning hearing board for a special exception, there was none of this on the plans. There was nothing on the plans, and the zoning hearing board allowed them to use this as an entrance. And now it's got all sorts of structures, water ponds and drainage pipes, and they've got to carve away embankments, and they need easements and waivers for easements and everything else. This was never put in the plans when it was approved by the zoning hearing board for an entrance. That's one thing. The other thing, all these plans, to my fellow engineer, it's just pencil marks on paper. It doesn't reflect reality necessarily, and I don't think it does. Based on my 35 years there and battling our water problems at great expense. The other thing, I got a chance to read the letter from the township engineer. He's not talking about the septic mound, which they're planning on putting in, and this 600 or 700 foot pipe run that has to go uphill to the septic mound, and the septic mound is right next to my house. And to mix, I don't know if Mr. Gerhardt's here today, but right behind his property too. And they're gonna be taking down 20 or 30 very mature beech and hickory trees. The worst thing you could do at a time when we've lost, on my property, I lost 20 or 30 black ash trees, and that whole property back there looks like a graveyard for trees, including up in where Don is up there and that other half of that other 10-acre lot up there. So I can't understand how taking down mature trees like that is gonna help my water problem, because we're downhill from that. Plus, that thing passed septic, but it barely passed. The other thing is where they have this 700 foot run going uphill to the septic, that was brought up in the engineer's letter that he doubted that they had allowed enough land for disturbance, that enough of the would be disturbed by the construction. And I agree with that, because I had a septic system put in. They brought in truckloads and truckloads of gravel. They have to take down a lot of trees to do that, to even get to where the septic mound is to do that. And I'm sure that has to be re-looked at in the plan too, because it's a lot more than this little line they put in the plan. And the other thing is that part of the property there has a very hard, a high hard pan. In other words, the bedrock is up close to the surface. In places you can't dig 6 inches down without hitting the bedrock. How they're gonna bury a pipe for 600 feet in there without doing any kind of major blasting or whatever, that's what I'd like to be convinced of. I'd like to see you go out there with a shovel and dig it and show me you can get even a foot down in that. And if they gotta blast my well, which by the way, none of these property, they're supposed to be showing wells on these property plans. There's no well shown. My well is not shown. Klaus's well is not shown. Gerhardt's well is not shown. I talked to a man about getting my well,
Your time's up.
okay. To get my well characterized to find out if it was gonna be damaged, it's gonna cost me $10,000 to get that study done.
Thank you. Others? Okay, without objection, what I'd like to do is have solicitor meet with you, our engineer, and Don, I'm gonna ask you to go to that meeting. You guys work out the best engineering solution you have with our engineer, and then what I'd like to do is get the residents to come in and you brief them in an informational. So,
Yeah, that's fair.
all right.
Yeah.
So for residents that are here who want to do that, please contact Michelle so she can build a list, and we'll get that scheduled. Good to go?
Yeah.
Commissioners, okay?
One last question, what septic was approved up there?
It's a sand amount, so it would be uphill. I just wanna be clear, if we're gonna look at this, some of the items that were discussed, we may wanna get the health department out there to look at the adjoining houses, septic system too, maybe contributing to some of this water. So, if we're looking at it, I mean, we're trying to handle our stuff, but if there's concern on these existing lots, it may be some of the items that were discussed, it could be from their own septic system. So we may wanna have the health department come out and eventually later on be part of a meeting.
All right, thank you so much for coming in for the brief information, so we'll move on that action.
Thank you.
Okay?